Hi everyone and welcome back. So in today's video I'm doing another mixed media art tutorial, and I'm going to be walking you through how I created this mixed media spread, a double page spread in my art journal. And along with being a tutorial, this video is also part of the Take 5 collaboration. And just very briefly, for those of you that may be new, the Take 5 collaboration is a monthly collaboration between a group of artists, art journalists here on YouTube, and every month we create a page in our art journals using 5 prompts. And the nice thing about using prompts is that it gives you a chance to challenge yourself, to use supplies that you may not have used, or to just approach art journaling, mixed media or art in general in a slightly different way. So that's one of the reasons why I particularly enjoy doing this monthly challenge in my art journal. It just helps me to think outside the box sometimes, so that's nice. And I'll leave a list of the prompts that I used. I'll also talk about them in a moment, but I'll leave links to all the ladies that are part of the collaboration down in the description box below. And if you like the sound of this prompt list and you want to use it in your own art journal or in your own art, then feel free, go ahead. We love it when people use the prompts in their own art journals. So that said, I'll move on to discussing this tutorial. Oh yes, I also wanted to say that all the supplies I used are also listed in the description box. So if you have any questions about the journal I'm using, the glues and things, it's all listed in the description box where you can find a full list. So that said, the page that I'm working on is a double page spread. And the first thing that I'm doing is I'm gluing down some scraps of old wrapping paper that I had in an old box somewhere, and it has like a faded vintage text on it, and the wrapping paper is slightly off-white and the text is a kind of light brown gold kind of colour. So I was ripping that up into tiny little pieces to create a layered and dimensional look for the background. Now the 5 prompts for this month were blue and green, ink, layers, white pen, and then something recycled. So you don't have to do the prompts in any particular order, and I started with the last prompt, which was something recycled, and that's the wrapping paper. I'm always saving and hoarding old bits of wrapping paper, so I thought I would use it in today's video. And then I'm also doing the layers prompt at the same time. And for this background I was really going for getting some dimension, and one of the things that I did was to cut all the pieces up. So instead of just layering, I could have just layered the wrapping paper down in one, sort of cut out a piece that fitted my page and then layered it down in one go. But I really wanted to create some depth and some dimension because I was going to use ink sprays later on, and I wanted the ink sprays to highlight all those little bits of paper. And you'll see what I mean a bit later on. And so I also used some old card scraps that I had left over from another project. And here I'm using some texture paste and a sort of like a brick stencil to create some textured dimension. Now this isn't a prompt list, and that's one of the other things you can do if you're following along with a prompt list. You just use it as a starting point and then you go on from there and add what you think would be nice to your page. And one of the reasons why I wanted to add the brick texture was I wanted to have another layer to the page, but I also wanted to create some cracks and create some interesting dimension for the ink. So here I'm taking some green and some brown ink, and I'm just spritzing just a little bit of colour down onto the page. And you have to be quite gentle with these inks. These are the green is the Dylusions ink, and then the brown is one of the distress inks. And you have to be very careful when you're putting down the ink because it's very easy to get too much. And as you can see, the ink is pooling and spreading in different places. It gives it the page a really interesting effect. And when you spray ink onto layers, you get the ink kind of pooling underneath certain layers, or you are sort of highlighting down the edges of the papers. It just looks really interesting, and it gives the page it doesn't feel noisy to me, but it has a lot of interest, particularly in the background. And the gold text just comes through enough to give it some interest, but not too much that it overpowers it. So now I'm just going through a lot of different collage supplies that I have. These are ones that are all in my shop at the moment, and I'm just kind of going through a lot of these printouts to kind of find a collage card that would look nice. and I'm just kind of playing around with some different colours. And one of the things that I really try to do with these journal pages is to really push the colours that I'm using and to experiment and to use lots of different media. And it's a really great way of using up any scraps of paper you have or old art supplies that you want to use up. It's a really great way of just using up scraps. And I keep a box or a folder. No, it's a folder, not a box. I keep a folder full of scraps of paper, little test prints. So a lot of those collage cards you saw were part of my original test prints. I was test printing all the digital files when I first made them. So I'm finding a way to use even things like test prints. And if you do test printing or anything like that where you are printing multiples of things, having an art journal or using them like this is a nice way to use things up so they don't go to waste. So here I'm using a couple of scraps of cardboard. All of these have been used in previous projects that I've done, so it's nice to use them up. And I sort of just matted the collage card of the girl's face onto some brown cardstock and then a little bit of that strip of that pattern paper. And the pattern paper, I'm pretty sure, came from the Transatlantic travel set. I had a little pack of it last summer, and I used it several times, but I had all these scraps left over, so I was using that today. And I decided to matte the collage card just to help her stand out from the background a bit more. And as you can see, I'm kind of just playing around with different scraps of paper, and I'm trying not to make things too symmetrical. I think that that can make quite a big difference to your layout. So if you're working with, as you can see in the background, when I was laying down those paper scraps, I wasn't lining everything up to make it look symmetrical. It depends, of course, entirely on what sort of look you're going for, but for me, I wanted the page to have a lot of movement. So it's often helpful if you put things at an angle, if some things are lined up and some things aren't. It just helps to add a lot more visual interest to the page. So now I'm going in and I'm adding a little bit of blue into the page because blue was one of the prompts. The other prompts were ink, and I've used spray inks and then the distress inks, and then there's layers, and then there's the last prompt is the white pen, and I go in, that's the last thing I do, and I always add white pen to my page. So I went in with the blue distress ink and I just sort of rubbed the sponge gently across the page. And this is another reason why it's nice to have lots of layers on a page, because when you just rub your sponge across, the sponge skips a lot, and so you get a sort of a skipped effect, and it just adds some more interest, and it's nicer than just having a clean bit of colour. I really like that sort of, it ties into the vintage theme of the page. And then I got one of the little elements from the Vintage Afternoon collage sheet, and these are all printable products that I currently have in my shop, and there'll be a link in the description box below if you want to look at them. But I'm just sort of cutting out different elements from the test prints, as I mentioned earlier. There was a quote that I was sort of playing around with for a while, but I ended up not really liking I wasn't in love with the quote, so I didn't really end up using it. And now I'm just taking a little bit of gesso, and again I'm sort of just dragging the brush very lightly across the page, and as you can see it's sort of skipping over the texture paste, over the layers, but I just wanted to tone that background down just a tiny bit because I felt like it was just a little bit too bright for my my focal point here, which is the little collage that I'm doing with the papers. And that's another tip as well. If you've got a background that's far too bright and bold, add a little bit of gesso to it, and you don't have to cover the whole thing. Just take a brush, and what I do is I don't wet the brush, so it's a dry brush, and I kind of just dry brush the paint across the page. And here I'm getting a few stickers that I have lying around. This was from one of the Echo Park paper pads that I had. I think it's from the Just Be You collection. I have to double check that and leave a link. It was from last year, so I don't think it would be still available. Although if you do like the Echo Park papers, I did notice that they have a website where you can buy them digitally. So if you really loved one of their sets, you could get the digital files and take them down to a print shop and print them out, which I thought was really nice, because there have definitely been in the past paper pads from Echo Park paper that I've really loved, and I've been not wanting to use them up. So I think in future I might actually just get the digital files and print them out as I have a printer. So I just wanted to let you know that in case you didn't know. I only found out a couple of days ago actually when I was looking online, so that's quite good. So now I'm just adding in some white dots. At this point it's quite hard to know what to add. I always find this part I fuss a lot towards the end of a page. For me it's quite quick getting through the background, layering up some foreground elements, but when it comes to the final details, particularly when like adding those stickers in and doing the final touches, I'm never quite sure sometimes when a page is finished. And normally I finish a page when I feel like if I add any more to it I might ruin it. And sometimes if you over fuss you can lose elements of a page, but if you do lose certain elements you can always try and bring them back again, add some more colour on. An art journal page is only finished when you feel like it, and you can throw as much media and as much ink as you want at your page, or as much as your journal or paper will allow. So that's what I've done for this month's Take 5 collaboration. I really enjoyed the prompt list, and I always love working from these prompt lists. I find them just very useful for kickstarting some ideas in my art journal, and it's a nice change from some of the illustration projects I've been working on this month. So I enjoyed doing this page today. So anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, make sure you leave them down in the comments below, and I will see you all again next week.